Hello, friend. The Mystical American Patriots Society is transmitting to you from beneath 4 million cubic feet of solid granite, in the burning heart of the Yellowstone caldera. This is a variety program for normal sandwich-eating Americans with some concerns about living in a deranged, post-Christian technocracy. So, keep your third eye on the sky and your ear to the ground, as Sumo and Smokestack connect your main brain vein to a higher plane. Are you ready? Stand by.
Lay down! Stop. There is nothing for you here. We are the servants of the nothing. All your efforts will come to naught. We have watched your kind from the beginning. Worms, maggots, join us, and we shall give you rest. Lay down! Everything you love will die.
Good morning.
Well, good morning.
Let's talk about the Kentucky meat shower.
You don't feel the need to kind of address the clip we just played?
No, not really. I mean, it will become obvious, I think.
Okay. It kind of upset me.
Which part?
Well, the part where you screamed, "Lay down," and I almost peed.
It was a bit much.
That's pretty intense.
Yeah. It's mostly Ruckus's fault. A lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah. Well,
But
he's got his hands in a lot of stuff.
on March 3rd, 1876, in Bath County, Kentucky, meat fell from the sky. What are we to make of that?
How much meat?
Chunks of lots and lots of chunks of red meat.
In what year?
1876.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, there was a farm, and then just meat started falling out of the sky. And some people tasted it, which I wouldn't do. If meat falls from the sky, I don't usually taste it.
I mean, I would in 1876.
Yeah, and they said it may be lamb or deer, but when they sent it in to the local hospital, they said it was some sort of lung tissue.
It was lung tissue.
Yeah, most of it was lung tissue. A couple of it was maybe a cardiac tissue, and some of it was. And there's still some pieces of it preserved in this museum in Kentucky. But they're like hundreds of pieces of meat, like they said about 2 inches by 2 inches on average, maybe some bigger. Just these meat strips.
That's pretty weird.
Well, it's the Kentucky may be the weirdest part of America because of the Kentucky anomaly.
The Kentucky anomaly.
Yeah, the Kentucky anomaly is this. It's this recognized by NASA. Not that means anything, but it's recognized by NASA as this giant. Probably, I think it's the biggest in the world. Magnetic and like geomagnetic anomaly. Like most of the Earth's magnetic field is roughly uniform, and then right in Kentucky, there's this giant place where it goes cattywampus.
Really?
Yeah, it covers most of the. It covers a lot of the area around Bath County, and interestingly, 70% of all the people in Kentucky committed to mental institutions come from this same area of the anomaly.
Oh.
I think it messes with people's heads. Or maybe it doesn't mess with people's heads. Maybe it allows them to see things that are always there. Or maybe things are coming through doorways, and that's the doorway. I don't know. But I always thought that was interesting.
So if you grow up in the anomaly, you're unsuited for a world outside the anomaly?
I think so. I think that's why so many Kentucky weird things come from Kentucky, like the Derby and the people with blue skin.
Bourbon.
Yeah. Are you familiar with the blue people of Kentucky?
Yes.
Yeah, they came from not too far from this area, which is where they were basically, they sort of inbred themselves to where they were blue. They had like blue, like Smurfs.
So if I go on a driving tour of Bath County, Kentucky, what would I potentially find there? I mean, is there anything to do?
It's a lot of nothing. I mean, it's just small town Kentucky, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of in the upper bits of Kentucky.
Okay.
Upper central. And you go there, and maybe that's where you see maybe you see meat fall from the sky. Maybe you see horses being prepared for Derby in the countryside. Maybe you see someone preparing bourbon.
Okay.
Maybe you see a cryptid.
Sure.
Maybe you go to a mental institution.
Maybe, yeah.
Because of having all those things happen on the same day.
So I mean, do compasses work in Bath County?
They get a little, yeah. If you're walking through, that was one of the ways it was originally noted, is people would be like going west, and then they would be following west, and then their compass would be like woo, woo, going crazy.
Ooh.
And people would get a little lost, and they get out of the anomaly, and it would work again. And no one is quite sure why either of those things happens. Some people speculate there's a lot more iron in the Kentucky anomaly, like in the ground.
Mm-hmm.
But geological surveys don't really bear that out. Like, it seems about the normal amount. But maybe there's more, like deep down or something. And then what they say with the meat shower is just a bunch of vultures vomited at the same time. Which seems a bit...
I was thinking pterodactyl. That's where my mind was
It seems a bit
going.
incredulous, but I mean, I think vultures do to this thing where if one of them throws up, all the vultures will throw up.
Okay, so it's like being on an airplane.
Yeah, I think the vultures have this thing where they think, this thing we just ate, someone in our flock ate, has made someone sick. Let's just all throw it up, just to be safe. Which is a good thing. It's a good social skill to develop if your species eats dead carcasses, pretty much only.
Okay,
it's like, if it's making you sick, it made Tom sick, let's all just collectively gorge it out.
So did the people that tasted the meat get sick?
No, that one. And then two, you'd think it would be pretty obvious if it was coming from a big flock of vultures over your head. Right?
True.
Because you just look up and there'd be vultures.
Well, did they just find the meat on the ground, or did they see it fall from the sky? I feel like that's an important detail.
There were some people that saw it fall from the sky, and then they went into the town and said, hey, come look at all the meat that fell from the sky. And they did analysis on it, and like I said, a lot of it was lung tissue, and one hospital even said they thought it was human lung tissue from a human infant.
Oh, how horrible.
How horrible, isn't it? But they don't know that, but they weren't sure about that. That was a...
So is the Kentucky geomagnetic anomaly at all related to the goblins, Kentucky Goblin?
I think so. I think the Kentucky Goblins are very much related to the anomaly. I can't prove it.
Okay, just a feeling.
I mean, who can really prove anything about the goblins?
Well, good point. Yeah.
But yeah, the Kentucky anomaly is something that I feel no one really knows about, but they should know about it.
It seems important.
It's very important, and I think it explains if you live in Kentucky, listener, and you are a weirdo. This may be why. It's not your fault. It's not your fault that you're a big problem for society. So, yeah, that's true. So today we're going to talk about. That has nothing to do with anything. I just want to talk about the meat shower.
It's pretty cool.
But today we're going to talk about sympathy for the devil. What money is, and the endless American midnight. An introduction into parapolitics.
Ooh.
But Happy New Year.
Hey, Happy New Year to you.
Before we get going, I hope Happy New Year to our listeners. I
Indeed.
hope they're all having a good time. Did you do anything fun for New Year?
I gathered my family and we huddled in a bunker.
Yeah, the annual bunker huddle.
Yeah.
Which I feel is going to be the more common American celebration for everything. Valentine's bunker, Easter bunker.
I think some people in my neighborhood thought it was the end of the world, though, because the large amount of very high-grade fireworks going off, close to the ground.
Yeah.
And there were very many car wrecks along my road. Literally, I woke up and I drove to the store on New Year's Day, and I saw the scenes of like 4 different car versus tree accidents within a mile of my home. It was a wild night. There was a lot of crazy noise going on New Year's Eve. A lot of
drunk driving, you think, was the cause of this, or?
I mean, it could have been goblins also,
Could have been goblins.
One or the other.
Yeah, I feel like there was a lot more fireworks here too. I think people have been cooped up all year.
Yeah, they're kind of letting loose.
They're just letting loose. And they're like, "Hey, 2020's over. It's gonna be great." And then of course, I was just sitting there thinking, "Oh, you poor sods."
You have no idea.
You have no idea. You saw that meme I sent where it was the old man who was wearing a shirt, and then for Christmas he got the same shirt.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the old shirt was labeled 2020, and then he's holding up the new shirt, and it's labeled 2021, but it's the same.
Yep.
I think that'll be fun.
So is that your official prediction? Is continuation of 2020? Are we stuck in a time loop?
I think, well, it depends. So, here's what happens. Is that whoever is in office, the opposite of what their people want will happen.
Okay.
Right? So, when Obama was in office, right, he didn't actually do a lot of lefty things.
Mm-hmm.
He gave all the power of healthcare over to corporations.
Right.
And said it was government healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
When it was just corporations selling you healthcare, like they always wanted to.
Right.
And then he started a bunch of fights in the Middle East and bombed everybody. Right? And then Trump's in power, and then in quotes, in power, because the presidents are always sort of in quotes. And then he's like, there's no war, really, no more new war, but you get universal basic income, right? And sort of like medical communism.
Yeah.
It's always the opposite, because it's all about the inverse, right? So you take the thing and then I think like if Biden Harris get in, and I'm still sort of like, I still expect another shoe to drop on all that.
Mm-hmm.
Not for any particular reason other than it just feels like it will.
Yeah, I'm there with you.
It just feels like it will. It may not. It may just be like do, and then Biden is in and it's a thing, or it may. But it just feels like that's too clean.
It feels incomplete.
We
need a climax.
Clean. Yeah, it feels like there's no climax to the end of this Trump, the Trump story arc.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like there's so that's all I'm saying. But so if Biden gets in, people will be because what happens is, you're not worried about your guy.
Yep.
And then so they could sell you on all the opposite stuff, because people are like, Obama gets in there and he's like, don't, I can't do an Obama voice, but here I'm gonna try. Hey, matey, don't worry about me. I am black like you and sort of youngish, and I will bomb the Middle East. And they go, oh, it's okay, because he's like us. He's black too. So let's bomb the Middle East and it's fine. Because as long as you're in the Middle East.
Yep.
And you see a drone missile coming at you.
Mm-hmm.
And you start freaking out, like, oh no, run! And then Mohammedette, my wife. I don't know any Middle Eastern wife names.
Fatima,
run! And she goes, don't worry, husband. We are part of history. This missile being sent by the first woman. They just it's just the different. It's like this. They do the same thing, but now it's like, oh, it's our people doing it.
Well, Ronald Reagan gave us gun control and giant deficits. So,
and also and also gave away California forever.
Yeah, George Bush 1 gave us federal funding for abortion, Planned Parenthood.
Exactly. I mean, Trump probably did more stuff against the Second Amendment than Biden will, where he did the bump stocks and the red flag laws.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's always the opposite. Because you think because people don't go along with it when they think it's the other guy imposing it on them.
Mm-hmm.
But when it's their guy, then they're like, oh, it's on my team.
So are we turning on Trump now? I'm not ready to turn on Trump.
No, we're not turning on Trump. I'm just pointing out a pattern, which is that when you think your guy's in, because the guy in power often doesn't even know what he's doing.
Yeah.
There's just bills coming across, and he's like, yeah, and there's the generals want to do things, but see, when your guys, so under Trump, there's very little support for going to fight in wars because the left is like, no, this is exactly what the right has always wanted to do, right?
Okay.
But then when Biden or Obama is in there, he's like, well, this isn't something I want to do, but it's something that's really necessary right now. And everyone's like, oh, okay, well, right this minute, I guess it's fine. But he's going to stop in a minute, right? And they're like, yeah, and it never stops, right? So that they can get through the opposite thing because that side that usually defends against that thing has their guard down because ostensibly their people are in charge.
It does seem to fit with this this idea that the minority position in American politics actually exercises more power over policy than the majority position.
Correct. Yeah, because for this and many reasons.
Yeah.
Which is where well, it's the. Are you familiar with the idea of the Judas goat?
No.
So the Judas goat is something that was used primarily in America, although it was a thing in other cultures as well. But what you would do is you would train one of the goats to walk certain paths, right? And then you would introduce this goat to the other goats later when you needed them to go to those places.
Okay.
And so the Judas goat would be trained to walk from the herd to the slaughterhouse. And all the other goats, because they're herd animals, would follow him. And then they would take the Judas goat and set him aside to use again and then slaughter all those goats.
Oh, wild. Right,
so the Judas goat doesn't even know what he's doing, right? Much like these presidents. They're like, oh yeah, here's something, and then so all the powers that be are like, hey, listen, their guards are down. Like if a Republican president's in there, they're like, their guards are down on Second Amendment stuff. Yep. Now we could push that in there, right? Now we have the Judas go, and then they just give the thing, and he signs it, and he's like, yeah, this makes sense. And everyone's like, well, it's our guy, so it's probably not that bad, right?
Right.
And the same thing happens on the left, where they're like, hey, here's. I mean, like the push for sort of the medical tyranny we've seen this year would have probably never happened under a leftist president because the right would have had their defense up against it so much.
Yes.
Right, but it's this they use presidents as Judas goats, and the presidents don't even really understand what's going on a lot of the time. I don't think. I think maybe as they go along, maybe the whites are like, something weird's happening here. But
right.
But that's part of parapolitics, which is the sort of metaphysical, paranormal side of politics, which is where they use the inverse. Everything with Satan is about the inverse. You flip it over. You take the hourglass and you turn it.
Okay.
You take the pyramid and you flip it over.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And one of the ways that you flip over, is you take the things that are real and you flip it over and make everything about the thing that is imaginary, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so now we're gonna get it. Have you ever heard the parable of the bankers that kept their money on the island of gold?
What? No.
Or not the island of gold. Just So once upon a time, there were countries, not unlike in our reality, and they did commerce with each other, and they paid each other money for debts and stuff. And what they would do is they would ship gold back and forth to each other across the sea and across land, and sometimes across air in hot air balloons to pay debts, right? And this got to be cumbersome because gold is heavy and passing it around took a lot of time, and they had to have guards to keep it safe, and sometimes the boats it was on would sink, and sometimes it would get robbed by bandits, and you had to account for it, and you had to have this army of accountants, and it was just this big giant thing. So all the leaders of the world and all the bankers got together and they said, listen, this is sort of a problem. Why don't we just take all the gold and we'll put it in one central place? And then we'll just have different drawers. Like here's Uzbekistan's drawer, and here's Azerbaijan's drawer, and here's Kenya's drawer, and here's Mexico's drawer, and we'll just keep the gold in those drawers. And then when we trade it, we'll just have a very small team that just goes and he pulls it out of the drawer, and then he puts it in the other drawer. And that'll save a lot of time. And everyone's like, that's a great idea. This is a great idea. That's what we'll do. So they decided on the central location in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, this island, and they built this giant thing deep underground, so it'd be very safe, like way underground. Take an elevator down to these vaults, and there are people employed. And anytime they send a piece of paper to them, like, hey, Canada has just given France 3 gold bars. Then the guy would take it, he'd go down the pneumatic tube, and a little sort of mole person would open it, and he'd look at with his spectacles, and he'd say, three to France. And then he would walk over to Canada's drawer, pull out the 3 gold bars, and put it in France's drawer. And this was great. And it's made everything so much more efficient. And this went on for several years. And then one day, about 10 years later, all of the bankers in the world and the heads of state, they said, let's go get together and have a party on this island, and we'll discuss economic policy. So they all go, and they're having a grand time, and a couple of them, they're drinking a little bit, and they say they have their families there, and they've brought their wives and children, and the children go, Daddy, can we go see the gold? Can we go see the gold? And they're like, sure, let's go see the gold. And they go to the caretakers of the vault, and they say, hey, we'd like to go see the gold. And the caretakers go, well, sir, it's a long way down, and I don't think the children would enjoy it very much. It's very damp. And they're like, oh, nonsense, let's go. It's like, well, I don't know, we've been having some trouble with the elevators. I don't want anyone to get stuck, and we could use the stairs. Let's go. Well, and it's a long way down the stairs. I mean, what is wrong with you? Why are you so resistant to showing us the gold? And finally it comes out and says, well, sir, like 6 months after we installed the thing, the basement collapsed and all the gold sank into a sinkhole, and we haven't had it for years. And they're, what? Yeah, when you send us the pieces of paper, we just keep an account of who has what, but the gold's not actually there anymore. And the guy was like, they all were sort of panicky, and they just said, this is the collapse of the world economic system. We're all going to go to where everyone's going to be. And the caretaker of the vault just said, but why? You've been doing this for years already. Just keep pretending. And they said, that's basically what money is. When it truly is. Like it's all a passed around fiction. And there was actually a place that did this for real, also in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Have you ever heard of the island of Yap?
No.
So the island of Yap is this island in the Pacific Ocean, and they were a very isolated island back in ye olden times, right? As islands in the middle of the Pacific before large boats tended to be. And there were tribal people there. They used things as money, as everybody does, and they used seashells and stuff. But they also needed the seashells weren't like that rare, and they would stamp them with stuff and whatever to make them like currency. But it was easy to forge them, and it also wasn't a very good store of value, because then you had this giant pile of seashells, right? So for really expensive stuff, they came up with another method. And what they did was one day they got on their canoes and they went exploring, and 300 miles away over the ocean, there was another small island, and on this island they had limestone, which they did not have on Yap. Yap had no gold, no silver, no real metals at all, and not even really any stone but sandstone and some granite. They found this nice, beautiful limestone. And they brought it back, and they carved it in these big, beautiful donut shapes, like a big circle, big wheel with a hole in the middle, right?
Okay.
And they would make it all ornate with all these carvings, and they'd bring it back, and they'd sit in the middle of town. And over time, and these things weighed, 3,000 pounds, 4,000 pounds.
Wow. Okay.
And they would put it on these big canoes and sail it back. And they would then over time that became money. It's like that was the most valuable thing in their society, the prettiest thing. It's like this, very hard to get, very rare, required a lot of labor to create. And so people would collect these things, and then after a time, like the rich guy would say, well, I want to, for my daughter's dowry, I'll give you one of these big stone circles. And they were like, great. And then so over time that became like, they had your seashells as like, that was your like copper coins or whatever. But then like gold was these big stone circles, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they just had them, and they had this team that would roll them from one person to another when they traded them. But there got to be so many of them after a few hundred years of doing this, because they would go to the place and get the stone and make it into a circle and bring it back. And there were so many of them, they were rolling these around all the time and having to pay the people in seashells to do it. So they said, well, why don't we just leave it where it is, and I'll just give you a piece of paper that says that you own it now. And if you ever want it, you can move it, but why bother? And so there were just these stone circles sitting in the middle of town, or in someone's lawn, and they're like, is that yours? Oh, no, I don't even know whose that is anymore. I traded that 10 years ago. Still sitting in my lawn, but, or it's in the middle of town, and whose is that? And everyone would just know whose it was. It didn't go to anybody. It just sat there, right? And ostensibly, if you wanted it, you could hire people to move it to your house, but you didn't really need to, because you were going to trade it later anyway. Okay. Just leave it there, right? And it got so far to the point that one time they were bringing one back from the limestone island, and there was a storm, and it fell off the canoe and sank. And they got back, and they said, we're very sorry. I know you all funded this trip to go bring this fancy stone circle, but it is a thing. We're sorry to the benefactor that wanted us to have it made. And all the people got together, and they said, well, it's fine. It's still good money. It's just at the bottom of the ocean. But we can still trade the paper for it, fine. Right? And they did. They went on trading the paper for this, the one you couldn't even ever get, because no one had actually moved the stone circles from one to another in generations. So well, what does it matter if it's actually touchable? Just because your money is at the bottom of the ocean.
So somebody did the work to produce it, in theory.
Right.
Therefore, it had value, even though
it could never be accessed.
So, what's the difference between that and a stone circle yet to be made?
Exactly. Or you just go there and say that you made it.
And then it fell in the ocean.
That it fell off the ocean. Or why even bring it back once you make that step? Just say, oh yeah, there's an imaginary ocean, island, where all the stone circles are. And we're just keeping track of them here. And if you want one, sure, you could send your people over there to get it, and they'll bring it back, and it's fine. But who do you really want to go through that trouble?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so then you're passing around these notes of who owns what, but nothing is actually changing in the physical world. In fact, it's dubious that the thing that you're trading even actually exists. Right?
Right.
Now, how is that much different than when I go to the store and I put in a card and then electrons go somewhere? Nothing changes in the physical world at all. I don't give them anything. They don't, and then they just like, oh yeah, you paid me, and they give me the thing. And then I walk out.
It's not a good situation the longer you think about it.
But nothing, nothing happened, right? Yeah. There's, it's even when you had, at least when you had currency and bills, then you would exchange something like, here's this, and you give me this. But now I just put in a card, and then numbers in one Excel spreadsheet in someone's database slightly change, and someone else's increase. And that's all that happens.
Yeah.
Does the money even exist anymore? And the answer is no. If you add up all of the supposed value that rich people have, and all the value that middle class people have, and poor people, and you add it all up together, all the stocks, all the bonds, and you say like, well, is there enough printed dollars to cover this? No, not even close. The supposed amount of money being traded is in the trillions and trillions. And then like the actual number of like bills, if you had a magic spell that would gather all the bills into one place and you counted them, it would not come even close. Right? So not only is the money backed up by nothing, but it also isn't even there. Right?
Right.
That's the crazy thing. Okay. And then, but people still sort of, in their mind, and this is one of the reasons, this is a parapolitics thing. This is why they make coins look like metals that are valuable. Mm-hmm. Like, they coat them in zinc and stuff to make them look like silver. Yeah. Even though they're not, because psychologically people are like, oh, it's a coin. Mm-hmm. They're like, it's a thing. Even though, like, you look on the edge and you're like, oh, this is just garbage. And then U.S. dollars, at least dollar coins, they make to look sort of golden color. Right. Right. Although people that are familiar with gold, it doesn't look anything near the same. And because that creates, and I read somewhere, it was something like 70% of the U.S. public still thinks that the dollar is in some way connected to gold.
Really?
Yes. And that they don't ever tell anybody this because that would break it's like the bankers on the island who are like the custodian is just like, just don't mention it and it'll be fine. Yeah. Right? And so for a long time until 1974,
Richard Nixon, another Republican.
Exactly. Every time you think of something that happened left wing, real bad, it was a Republican president, and vice versa. Everything right wing that people are afraid of, like giving money power to all the corporations, is always a leftist president. Yeah. Because the Judas goat is a very effective tactic. So when in 1974, like for every dollar that was printed, but not really, but at least because they were also printing more dollars than they had available too back then. But ostensibly, for every $35 printed, the United States had an ounce, a troy ounce of gold to cover it. And you could go to any bank in America and give them $35 and they would give you an ounce of gold. At any time. Now, people stopped doing that, right? Because they were like, well, it was just like the Yap situation. It's like, well, I have the dollars. I can, in theory, go exchange it for gold anytime I want to. But that's a lot of trouble. And we'll just keep trading the stuff, right? And so then, after 50 years of doing this, the government realized, hey, we could just do a little bait and switch here and just say, well, you can no longer redeem it for gold. You can still buy gold for people, sure, but it's not tied to gold. Yeah. It's not tied. The dollar isn't tied to gold. And it's fine. You say, it's fine. It's going to be okay, right? But we're just going to pretend. And so until 1974, Fort Knox was where America kept its gold. And you would ostensibly, again, for every $35 that they printed, they had 1 troy ounce of gold. Now, did they print more than that and pretend? Almost certainly. But at least in practice, right?
It's probably why they had to shut it down, is because...
Correct.
The jig would be up soon.
The jig would be up if everyone... Well, it was after World War II and people were trying to pay their debts, right? And so they printed all these dollars and the countries were going to start making good on their debts. And so everyone was like, but the caretaker of the imaginary vault on the island came to people and said, that stuff's not there anymore, right? That's just, you got to come up with something else. And so Fort Knox still exists. It's still a place. And they probably still have some gold there, although all indications are that the gold is rapidly diminished. No one is ever allowed to go in there and look at it. Like you used to, before 1974, they would have like documentaries go down there and people would talk about the economy and the cameras would go down to the vaults and they'd show you all the gold. That hasn't happened since then. There's been no videotape of it. There's been no... And in like 2008, I believe it was, Germany wanted to redeem some of its gold, right? So, because just like on the parable I told, people today will countries today will give gold to other countries to like keep it as storage.
Yep.
It's sort of like the modern gay democratic version of marrying your wife off, your daughter off to the other country to make peace.
Okay, yeah.
Right, you're like, here, I'll just give you a bunch of my gold you can keep.
Right.
And then I'll trust you with it. And then they say, okay, we'll give you some of ours. And so in 2008, it was later than that, 2014, Germany sent some delegates over to the United States and said, we'd like to take our gold back, please. And the United States said, well, I don't know about that. I mean, and they made all these excuses like, well, we don't, and they kept insisting. This went on for like 6 months.
Yep.
The German delegates were here. And they kept said, well, at least, they said, let us see the gold. They said, well, okay, let's go to Fort Knox. And they brought him in there. They took him to one room. They said, here's some of it. And they said, where's the rest of it? They said, oh, it's back there. It's back there. And they were like, well, can we see it? No, it's too much trouble to drag it all. It's so heavy. Here's some of it. And Germany got very suspicious about this, but they couldn't do anything, right? Except not give the U.S. any more of its gold in the future. Mm-hmm. But that's a pretty big indication that it just may not be there anymore. It's been stolen by cryptocrats and kleptocrats and politicians and generals and whoever has looted the treasury over the years in secret. Because that's a pretty big target, is the Fort Knox gold, and it probably has a lot of thieves going after it, pursuing quasi-legal means of getting it, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's doubtful that there's even gold in Fort Knox. Like, we really have nothing. That we have less than nothing. The United States is so broke, but the only way the fiction that keeps operating is that we pretend very much that the vault is still there on the island with the gold, even though it collapsed years ago.
Well, no, there is something backing the value of our currency.
Right, which is bullets.
Violence, right.
Right, that's the only thing. But they're like, look, but all it really does is say, trust us, the vault's there. Right. Can we go see? No. Right, and then there's the guy, and people are like, well,
it's use our money or we'll kill you. Right. AKA Muammar Gaddafi.
Exactly. That's why Muammar Gaddafi had to be killed by the again under Obama's watch, right? So you would say
Saddam Hussein also.
Huh?
Yeah. Also Saddam Hussein.
So like like under Obama again, like, we love Muslims, we're the left, we don't like slavery, and then under Obama, using the Judas goat tactic, destroy Libya, turn it into a slave state, and kill the Muslims. Yep. Right? And so, because people are like, well, we trust Obama, right? And it's obviously for a good reason. Yeah. Is to never trust anybody. But imagine what might happen if the and they never tell anybody. They never bring it up. Like, it's just like in bodybuilding or in sports. I think this is when I think about it, this is where I really got into conspiracy culture, because at some point I realized, everyone actually involved in the sports understands that everyone is on steroids all the time. Yet the public, for some reason, thinks that everyone's natural and there's all these tests going on. Right. Right? And then it's like, you look at them and you go, are you looking at the NFL players? Mm-hmm. They are ridiculous in physique often. Do you think that is possible without major chemical assistance? And they're like, well, they test. And then you go, they don't even, really? Mm-hmm. Are you aware, the NFL tells you months before when they're going to test. The NFL does everything possible to give you the means of not pegging their test. Yep. And the Olympics people, I was talking with Chad Wolf the other day, and one of our PhDs. Mm-hmm. And he was telling me, because he was a big still is actually. He's big into the athletics and everything. And he was telling me one time the Americans hired I believe it was a Slovenian strength training coach or something like that, one of those Eastern European countries, and because he won so many gold medals for Slovenia, and they said, "Well, come over here and train us," and he was like, "Sure," and he comes over here and he's like, "Oh yeah, these are great. Okay, we're gonna start your training measurement. You do the clean and jerk every day. Here's our progression for that. Here's a deadlift. We're gonna do that. Here's the conditioning. Here's your diet, and then every morning you're gonna take the pinks." These pills that are the pink pills, then we're going to take the browns in the afternoon, and this is your, this is HGH, and this is and people are like, no, we can't, we're not supposed to cheat. And he's like, what is the point? What are you talking, why am I even training you if you're not going to take the drugs? Right? Because the whole world is just like, yeah, we're all clean. Nom, right? And inject stuff. Like, it was always an open secret that the Tour de France had major doping in steroids.
Right.
And it was only when the public figured it out that they got upset. But everyone, it's obvious, right? It was just so, like Arnold Schwarzenegger for like 30 years walked around saying he was a natural bodybuilder and everyone believed him.
Really?
Yeah, everyone was like, "Oh yeah, he's not." It's just yeah, like steroids have sort of the door's been blown open on that because they've been so ubiquitous,
right?
But for a long time, if you don't people would be like, "Oh no, he doesn't take steroids, does he?" It's like he looks like a giant alien. Of course, he's taking something. Like what? Who? Do you think he just trains like people like they always go, "Oh, I train 5-6 hours a day," which no one does in at least in bodybuilding because you can't. Your muscles give out, right?
Right. Yeah.
And that's code for I take steroids. And when they say I've been my diet's really on point, that means I take steroids most of the time. That's what these things mean, because or even recently people still fall for this over and over again, because if people just pretend, there's this overwhelming desire to just go along with it, because then I guess you feel like you're calling people a liar or whatever. I don't know, but like
which quarterback was it that credited his incredible physique and performance to his vegan diet?
Oh yeah. He's like, it's and he's
whatever
just
it was.
Everybody.
Was that Tom Brady? I can't remember who that was. It was some NFL quarterback.
I
just remember hearing that and thinking that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And if anybody believes that, oh man, it's crazy.
Yeah. Well, there was Ronnie Coleman.
I'm not familiar with him.
He was one of the greatest American bodybuilders.
Okay.
And he used to walk around. Be in the day, and he would be like, "Oh yeah, I'm natural," and then his arms are like as big as someone else's body. I'm natural, and then he'd be like, "And I have 0.33% body fat."
Right.
And that's how I look so ripped. I have 0.33% body fat, and then everyone's like, "Oh really?" He was on Jay Leno, I remember at one time, and he was like shirtless up there, and he was like, "How do you look so?" He's like, "I got 0.33% body fat." And then anyone that knows anything is like, liar. Yeah. You would be dead. Mm-hmm. You would have died long ago if you had The only people who have 0.33% body fat are corpses. You don't. And I don't know. He may have really thought that. Someone may have given him a test and said, "Oh yeah, you have point." But if they did, the test was incorrect because there's zero way. But people are just like, "Oh yeah. Yeah, it makes sense." Right? And so there's this, everyone in the know that's even remotely associated with athletics realizes how prevalent steroids are in almost every field. I mean, like, even like Mark McGwire was hitting his home runs, and then like everyone got surprised that he had steroids. It's like, obviously.
So, okay, I got a question.
Yeah.
Is part of this, this whole covering over and hand waving about steroids in sports and such, is part of it to give the plebs an illusion for themselves. People tend to sort of get their self-image or their national
Right.
image from famous people or athletes or whatever. So it's like we see all these healthy looking, powerful looking people on TV, and it helps us not believe that we're being poisoned by, big ag or whatever. Because if we're all being poisoned by industrial society and whatnot, we wouldn't be seeing all these really healthy, powerful, beautiful people on the screens, right? It's just, and you can
Right.
sort of disassociate from your own poor health by believing in their health.
Well, yeah, I think so. I think that's been a major driving force behind that. But I think that's also breaking down now that people are like, let's glorify fatness.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you're right there. But see, that's the thing. It's like it's so obvious that it's not real, right? But yet everyone that isn't directly is sort of like in a haze about it.
Mm-hmm.
But think about what happened in the moments when they realize it's not that way. Like Lance Armstrong, there's this uproar, and all of those accolades that he had have to be taken away. I believe a similar thing is true with currency. If the majority of the public suddenly realized that there was nothing, like that the vault had collapsed into the ocean in the middle of the Pacific, like in the parable,
All right.
they would suddenly view the dollar as like, what? I'm just trading nonsense. And it wouldn't work. Right? I think it would stop. I think your force of your guns would run out of, because people would be like, this is ridiculous. What? We were trading nothing? You don't have anything behind this at all? There's not enough bills to come. I think it would come apart, which is why they never talk about it. Right? Like I think that if public awareness was of what money was happened, then this is why they don't like giving you money for stimulus. Because if they do, then you're just like then people start to question like, oh, well, if they had all this extra money, why didn't they just give it to us all the time? And then people are like, they literally just printed it off a computer printer.
Well, there was a lot of dismay and confusion out there among the Republican Party's reluctance to give out a $2,000 stimulus to everybody.
Right.
And you're saying that the reason is they were worried that the wheels are going to come off the illusion if they keep doing this.
I mean, they know. They're the bankers that went to the island and they said, let's see the gold. And they said, well, it's not really there, right? But just keep pretending and the wheels will keep turning because no one has to know. And they are like, okay, we'll keep pretending. But then part of that is you can't just like say, oh, we found all this new gold. Here, have $2,000. Woo! Like, because people start to be like, wait a minute. So
does Trump have this same understanding?
I don't know. I mean, this is.
Is he playing chicken with the kayfabe here? By calling for the $2,000 stimulus? I'm
not sure what he's doing with that, because that was the weirdest, like that big bill, like the stimulus bill, the $600 one with all the pork in it.
Yeah.
Everyone was against it. Like Donald Trump was like, no, and even Ocasio-Cortez was like, no, it's bad. But then they all signed it. Like,
well, I think part of
the
reason for the pork is they have to. So the government, the leadership of other governments, understand that the dollar is fake. Like they've seen the vault by this point.
Correct. They've seen the
vault.
vault.
And so now we're just bribing them to keep playing the game. They're like, if you keep playing Monopoly with me, I will just give you a stack of money out of the box.
Yeah,
and add it to your side of the board.
Yeah, I mean, it's really useful for you if you're in the know about the vault isn't real anymore.
Right.
And then they're like, I can tell people like, but here, take these. We'll say we moved a lot of gold to your drawer. And then people will do things for you to get the gold moved into their drawer. Now, the gold isn't there anymore, but they don't. Right?
So there's carrots and sticks with enforcing the global dollar system. And what was in that pork bill was a bunch of carrots.
Right. So, right. And so...
And Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein got the stick.
They got the stick because they were like, I want real money.
Yeah.
Right? And then and then they got this. But see, so this whole thing is predicated on something which doesn't even exist. And I mean that 100%. I'm not being like it's fake and gay in an ironic way. All the money, all the stocks, all of the finance, all of the GDP, it's all based on a gold mine that sank into a sinkhole years ago in the middle of the ocean. There's nothing there. There's less than nothing. There's I mean, even on that imaginary wealth we're in debt to. Right?
Yep.
I mean, just think about how crazy it is that the whole world is in debt. What does that even mean? Who are we in debt to? Mars? You know, it's like the global debt. Mm-hmm. It's like, what? How is Earth in debt? To who?
The Rothschilds.
Right, but it's like what is that? Like, it's like that doesn't. It's so much less than nothing. Like, it's so much nonsense upon nonsense at this point.
Yep.
That the collapse is going to be so hard and so bad because when people wake up to the reality, like, I mean, all these debts, so all of this retirement fund people are expecting, and they're building their lives around, they're making plans for, and they're buying houses about, and all of these bonds that will never get repaid, and all of the stocks that have nothing behind them, and all of the currency that exists on nothing, and all of this, like, when that sort of veil is finally torn, and they're like, hey, there's nothing there. There's no man behind the curtain. Everyone's it's just going to fall apart very rapidly, which is why you have to grow some food. I'm just telling you, there's nothing there. That no one has anything. No one has any wealth in any capacity. I don't know where someone took the gold from Fort Knox and they have something. So but I don't know who that person is.
Maybe the question, like the crystallizing question for somebody could be, how would you do in a barter-only economy?
Right.
How wealthy are you if there's no money?
Right. The reason Bitcoin is going up is not because Bitcoin is proving its worth. It's because the dollar's going down.
Yeah.
Bitcoin is, and same with gold. Gold has gone up tremendously in the past. It's almost doubled in the past 6 years. Because people are like, hey, wait a minute, is there anything here? And more and more people are like, no, there's nothing there. So it is basically a spell. It's like a magic spell weaved. It's like an illusion cast over the public, and then they go along with it. But if the spell ever breaks, all the things that rely on the spell also break. And this is why you gotta have this is how you have some sympathy for the devil. Because here's what COVID is. This is what COVID is. So COVID, disclaimers, COVID, there's a real virus. It makes some people sick. Some people really suffer from it, and most people don't, though, and it's very overblown. And you ask yourself why, doo-ba-doo, right? All those questions. Okay. Because COVID is the managed decline. So this is what, like, everyone knows this can't go on, and the wheels are starting to come off, and then they're like, hey, this is how we transition into poverty. And we're going to give you but see, what they're doing is they're saying, we're going to give you a really nice story that explains it, and that you can feel good about, and it makes the world seem to make sense, and it makes it seem like you lived in a rational place, and it makes it seem like that maybe it could have been prevented if you just did a little bit different, and it lets you blame people, let you blame Donald Trump, let you blame the Democrats, let you do this, let you blame everyone but yourself, and we're gonna give you this nice story as a gift to help you sort of die, right? And that is that's the mentality that I have come to think of these. That's what like, in that little opening thing, there was this line about the servants of the nothing, which is from the Neverending Story, I always thought that was the greatest term for demons I'd ever heard, because they are serving the nothing. Like, there's nothing there. It's all imaginary. Like all of the money that it's not real. Like none of it is there. But they provide a service for people that would like to continue in the fiction rather than face the reality, right? And that leads down to death. In every case, not just in the economic case, it's just very easy to show how that, because it's very sort of obvious.
Right.
But in all the cases, like most of the things, when you stop and think about it, most of the things that the world revolves around aren't even real. They're not even real. And this is where I sound like a no borders, no peace guy, you know, or no borders, no, but it's like, you know, California is a stack of papers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's no I mean, it's a location sort of, right? But the legal entity and all that is just paperwork. Like it's just like all of these things are just nothing. Like when you dig into them, it's just there's a pile of paper and it says refer to this paper and you refer to this paper and you go on and then you get to the place and it's like, well, it's just by decree.
Yep.
It's not really, it's so much of what drives the world, what people live their lives for, what people fight over, what they die over, what they're willing to kill over, what they're willing to divorce over. Not even there. It's not even there. Like pornography is the greatest example of this, maybe. It's like, we're going to give you this thing. It's like a fake woman. It's like a fake relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It's just pure, it doesn't even exist. It's just pixels on a screen. But people will trade that for the real thing because it's easier, it's more controllable, it's less likely to hurt them, right? Or to stab them in the back or break up with them or cheat on them.
Right.
And or it's easier than improving themselves so that a real woman would want them,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so the servants of the nothing, they're always serving nothing. Like when you look at what they're offering, it's always just smoke. This is why in Islam, the jinn are the creatures of smoke. They're made of smoke because they're not there. Like there's nothing, everything they offer just evaporates if you try to hold it. Right? It's like, there's no reality to it. And it just, when you try to grasp it. But that's what they're selling and people want it. They want the illusion. They want to, like people want to, like Trump was a great gift by the servants of the nothing to the left because they said, here's a man you can blame everything on.
Yeah.
None of it's your fault. It's all his fault. None of it's the people you like's fault. It's all his fault. And Obama was the same way for Republicans, and probably Biden and Kamala will be too if they get it. Like it's just like none of it's your fault. It's their fault. They're the problem. Every ill in the world is this person, and then you're like, but that. When you step back, you're like, that person's a TV character.
Yeah.
You've never met that person. You probably never will. What they're presenting to you in public is a persona. Donald Trump was literally a reality TV star. You know, it's like they're TV characters as far as you're concerned. They're just people that show up on the screen and they tell you a story and you can believe it or not. But if you choose to believe it, it will make you more comfortable with the bad things in the world and make you feel like it makes sense. And but see, they're offering a service, basically. That's the servants of the nothing. They offer, like, here's a way for you to die and feel good about it.
Mm.
That's what they're offering. Like they're like, come to us and we will give you rest.
Yeah.
You can lay down and it's gonna be okay.
BLM was a great example of this.
Yeah, like here's a way for you to feel good about dying. You know,
yeah.
Go out there. Be mad. You're righteous in your anger. Set fires to things. If you get caught in that fire, well, if someone shoots you, well, if you die of it's like if you go to the autonomous zone and you all get and you shoot up a teenager and go to jail forever. Well, but it's not your fault. You were fighting injustices.
Yeah.
That's a lot of war is that too. I mean, people have death wishes. They want to kill other people and they want to kill themselves. They really they hate themselves a lot of times. They want to die. Yeah. But they don't have the courage to commit suicide outright. So they need someone else to kill them. And so they like to go to war, and they're like that. Like, here, we're going to give you a story. You can act on all your evil impulses, you know, and you can put all your hatred on these other people, and justify yourself in shooting it. Like George, like this is the servants of the nothing, because they always make you do it, right? They give you the story, but then you have to go do it. Like George Bush killed not one person in the Middle East. He didn't pull the trigger on anybody. He told other people a story about why they should pull the trigger, and they did. Right? And like the Fauci has he's not forced one business to close. He's told other people they need to go and get mad at people, and they need to shut down, right? Yeah. He's just scared you. He's just giving you a story about how you're going to die if you don't. And you can believe that if you want to. And if you do, you have a nice, sympathetic story for why you're now poor. And now you get to be a victim like everybody else wants to be.
And right? The coronavirus thing is really nice because not only can you blame the virus itself on the decline of civilization, but then when you see somebody not playing along with the game, you can also blame them.
Right, because if they just wore their mask a little bit harder, we'd have been out of this 6 months ago.
Yep.
If you just did it a little bit harder, if you just did it, and now it doesn't matter that you can point to places that have locked down real hard, like California, and it hasn't made any difference.
Yep.
You can point to places that didn't lock down very much at all, and it didn't make any difference.
Well, that's just because of people like you who won't wear a mask.
Right. And then when you give counterexamples, people are like, "Oh, they're making up the data."
Yeah.
Or they're lying, they're covering it up, or they're, and I'm more as sympathetic as anyone can be to cover-ups, but like no matter what, so they give you the story. The servants of the nothing provide a service of ways you can go down to death and feel good about it. Like it's never like everyone in hell feels they're a victim. Everyone in hell feels like they were put there and it's not their fault. And also, because it's not their fault, there's nothing they can do to get out.
Yeah.
Right? And so they just fit and they just wallow. The servants of the nothing allow you every opportunity to wallow in self-pity. Right? And they just say, lay down. Just lay down. It's fine. It's fine. They don't talk as harsh as that clip in the beginning where they sound like demons until you start to resist them. And then, like, if you don't resist them, then they sound like very sweet. But when you start to say, I don't know, I don't really want to lay down, they start getting angry.
Yeah.
They say that they're like, listen to the story. And if you don't want to, this is why I compared them to decomposers in an earlier show. Because God has made physical decomposers, which take care of dead bodies. And there's also spiritual decomposers, which take care of the things that have died in spirit. And they're there for a purpose, because they, like, if bacteria didn't break down carcasses, the earth would be littered with carcasses. And it would be gross. And if there weren't entities which broke down those that were dead of spirit and soul, there would be a lot more ugliness and brokenness in the world. But they sort of serve to sort of like ferry that. I mean, hell in the Bible, when Jesus says what's translated hell, he talks about a garbage pit that's burning all the time. Outside Jerusalem was Gehenna, which is where you would take all your garbage and your corpses of animals and you throw it out there, and it was just always on fire. And he's saying that's basically what hell is like. You take the dead stuff, the refuse, and it goes out there and it just burns. You just get rid of it. And so you don't want to be the sort of person that has to be thrown out into the garbage pile, right? But also, becoming that is very easy, and it's easier than living and trying to, take responsibility and do what's right. So you can do that if you want to.
That's beautiful.
That's the servants of the nothing. The servants of the nothing. You got to watch out for the servants of the nothing. Everything is false, but it makes you feel right, like you're.
If the natural impulse to something is maybe just to lay down and give up.
Yeah, I mean
there's your warning flag.
there's your warning flag. But yeah, it's just like because every you gotta keep in mind everything they're offering is smoke. It's not even, it's less than nothing. It's like none of it's even really there. And in like a not in a meme faking gay way, and like it's just not there.
All the people whose lives were ruined by their participation in the BLM insanity of the past year.
Yeah.
Do you think they're feeling real satisfied and righteous and are they feeling like winners right now?
No, I doubt it. I bet a lot of them have ruined their lives. I mean,
Yeah.
well, first of all, a lot of them are in jail.
The payoff didn't happen for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
The victorious death or heroic achievement of status did not happen for them.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of them are, I mean, I was talking about how like people have death wishes. You see this come out so easily when they're allowed a target that they get to hate on, publicly accepted. Like pedophiles is a great one.
Mm-hmm.
And pedophiles are very evil, right? That's not defending them at all. But when the topic of someone that abuses a child comes up, the glee and the exuberance with which so many people are like, kill him, castrate him. You gotta be, and they talk about throwing him into prison where they themselves get raped.
Yeah.
That is coming from someone that has in them the desire to inflict death.
Yeah.
But they don't have a publicly acceptable outlet for it. It's like that, like back when witch burning was a thing, everyone was like, we know you have this in you. The servants of the nothing are like, we know you really want to kill. We know it. And we're going to give you someone that has a story attached to them about why it's good for you to do it.
Mm-hmm.
These women are witches. See, they're bad. They may have been bad. Like a lot of there's some of that stuff was based in like a lot of the witches were also abusing children when you look into it, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of them were not. A lot of them were just women that had this charge thrown at them, much like racist today, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just a charge thrown at you, and you say, here you can feel this person you can unload on, and no one will get mad at you. Everyone will agree, right? Just do it, and then you do it, and then you kill your soul,
Yeah.
because it's not. And so they're always giving the servants of the nut. They're always just giving you this thing. It's like, and if you do this, you'll be satisfied. And then you do it and you grasp it, and it just evaporates into smoke in your hand. Just because everything's not real with them. It's just all illusions. And that's why we're going to talk about the Endless American Midnight.
Oof.
The Endless American Midnight by Christopher Knowles, who I've mentioned before on the show. He runs the Secret Sun blog at blogspot.com, The Secret Sun.
Oh, this guy, cool.
He's written some books. You can get his books for whatever amount you want. And I enjoy that model. I may one day do that model. But he basically, you send him a PayPal or a donate on his website for anything from like a quarter to however much money you want. I sent him $7, and I said, I would like this book, please. And he says thank you, and he sends you one of the books he's written. Because he's just whatever you think it's worth, pay me that, right?
Cool.
I think you can even just ask for it for free, and he'll send it to you for free. So there's no reason not to get this book. But he's written a couple, and one of his new ones he takes from his blog posts over the years, and he's correlated them into sort of a narrative, and it's called The Endless American Midnight. Because what Christopher does is he, for the past, 15 years, has had a habit of taking his dog and walking the streets of his town in the middle of the night for like 3 hours every night, in between 2 and 5 in the morning.
Okay.
And he does this while he studies the stars and the constellations, and just sort of communes with God in sort of contemplative prayer, and he thinks about these things. And then he writes down what he's thought about in the morning, the Secret Sun. So he's talking about it's called the Endless American Midnight, and it's about parapolitics, which is sort of what we've touched on now, but that's like paranormal politics, or where the metaphysical meets the political, meets the social, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're going to be on about today. So the first chapter is this and I'm not going to go through the whole book because it's a long book, but we're just going to hit some highlights of the early stuff. Is about the dark night of the soul, America's spiritual crisis, how we got here. And so he's talking about like how did we get to this place? So he says, I like this. We've become trapped in an endless midnight for any number of reasons. But in many ways, it's because we believed we were immune from the laws of nature and the lessons of history. Right. We've been grasping, right? We could just go on doing these fictions forever, right? And he says, and I will argue that it's because the way we've learned how to live has divorced us from the natural order of this world, and more importantly, from the supernatural order as well.
So that's a huge deal, that we're separated by technology and industrial society from the natural created order.
Right.
That's something that American people do not understand what has been done to them.
No.
In that regard. And that's a whole show on its own, but I just wanted to highlight that point.
That's also one of the other benefits that's harder to explain to people of, like, you say, like, well, look, there's probably going to be a great economic collapse coming, grow some food, have some rabbits, get some pigeons or something, right?
Yeah.
But also, the more you get in touch with, like, growing things in the natural world, the more the illusions, like, the more you're in touch with what's real, the more the illusory appears illusory.
True. I was having a conversation with somebody recently, and we were talking about what happens to the American male in the corporate world, working a desk job at in some giant corporation, and how that affects him psychospiritually. Okay, because this is like one of the afflictions of the modern man. And I tried to tie in, and I was really having a hard time plugging my argument together because it's all very touchy-feely. I was trying to plug in the experience of killing an animal with, in your hands with a knife or something, and then watching it die, and then preparing that animal to be eaten and feeding it to your family. There's something that you learn there when you go through that process once or 100 times or whatever, that I can't even really explain it. Yeah, but you can't go back and look at the synthetic industrial life and not see the artificiality of it and the disconnectedness of it, the alienation of it, the idea that a man is just living in this aquarium, like a kept animal. It's not something that you can really communicate very well outside without the context of having the experience.
Yeah, it's like you can't explain blue to a blind man very well.
Sorta. Yeah.
It's like you have to it's one of those things you have to experience to really understand. And it's same with like growing plants, honestly, and to a lesser, like when you see like life emerge and become real in front of you.
Like when you try to talk to somebody that's never grown food or messed around with a garden or really worked on it, the beauty and the miracle of just watching a seed germinate and grow into this plant that is going to benefit you, and that you're going to take care of it and it's going to take care of you. It just sounds like a cheesy cliche to somebody who doesn't have any experience with that. And I feel cheesy expressing it in those terms,
right?
Over an internet podcast show, but at the same time, that experience is very real and beautiful to me. And to everybody else that's done it, it's like why do these weird British old ladies love gardening so much?
Right.
Well, there's a good reason that they love it so much, and maybe we need to say, oh, that's just something for old fuddy old ladies in England. Well, maybe it's not. Maybe it's for everybody. Right. And maybe they have something very valuable there.
Yeah, imagine you could never sell a population that had done anything with animal husbandry ever on the idea that there's no difference between males and females.
Right.
It never would work because like there's a difference between males and females in every species. The bulls act different than the cows.
Right.
The roosters act different than the hens. And you see how they work together. Like a rooster, if you've ever kept chickens, a rooster will, a rooster will defend the hens like with his life.
Yeah.
Like the fox comes and the rooster will fight the fox. And the rooster almost never wins because he's outweighed an absurd degree.
Yep.
But he will die, and he will get taken instead of the hens. And also, the rooster will people have these like you can watch a rooster get a worm, lay it on the ground, and cut it up into roughly equal portions and give it to hens. It's insane. Like they'll do that, but their behavior, and they fight the other roosters, right? And like male goats are different than female goats, and they're all. The idea that they would be the same, but you also see how the two work together to produce life.
Right.
Right? And they have complementary behavior patterns.
But sumo, there was homosexuality in the ancient world. One would
Right.
scream at you.
Yeah, and you say...
To which you could... yeah, go ahead.
And you say, yeah, and there was everything in the ancient world because people aren't different. There was murder... And there was people doing probably breakdancing.
Yeah.
That people have done everything forever.
But even the ancients knew that stuff was this nasty novelty. It wasn't a natural way of human living.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because they still like kept animals.
Yeah.
And
they knew it was an aberration. They wanted an aberration if they were pursuing it, but they didn't pretend that this was a normal, healthy human way to live.
Yeah, Ben Franklin knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
Ben Franklin knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
Because he knew better. But because they didn't live in an artificial environment, you know? And so like you were saying, raising things, or just like having a baby. Like when you see the miracle, like you don't really do a whole lot. Like women do more than men, but they aren't really in control of the process.
Yeah.
Like they're not putting the baby together like Legos. It just sort of happens, and then this person comes out, and then they start to grow, and they have their own personality, and they're smart, and a lot of times they outsmart you, and it's like, what's going on? Like, where did this come from? You know? But so many people, that's one of the reasons, like, the servants of the nothing don't want families to start, don't want people having kids, because then you see what's real. Mm-hmm. You know, and you don't become a dog parent. You know, or whatever. Even though, I mean, dogs are real, and I love dogs. But they're not a replacement for children. You know? We have a dog. He's great. But, you know, he's not like a human child. But so when Christopher's talking about how we got here, it's the way we're living has alienated us both from the natural order and also from the supernatural order as well. Perhaps to an even greater degree. So he argues he's very much he's a Gen X guy, and as a Gen Xer, he very much identifies with the put all blame on the boomers thing.
Okay. Which is understandable.
He said, I'm Generation X, history's neglected and forgotten cohort, raised at a time when America's parents, my insert here, the boomers, almost en masse decided to totally abdicate their responsibilities. They left the kids at home to be latchkey kids while they went off to discos and key parties, or abandoned their children altogether while they went off to California to, quote, reinvent themselves. Because of this, Generation X formed an unnaturally tight bond with junk culture, media culture, movies, music, and so on, and all too often as replacements for our real parents and guardians. And he argues that this is where the trend of being just sort of owned and having your identity formed by the media came from. Like this, they started the trend of being raised by TV, Generation X. And then when you're raised by TV, then naturally Marvel movies become your parent and advice giver.
Yeah.
Right? And Harry Potter becomes like how you form your worldview. Because you were raised by TV, and then so it's natural. You imprint on it like a goose, imprints on the first thing it sees, and then there you go. You know, then you're like, oh, I guess I am fighting Voldemort. Donald Trump is up there, and I'm in Dumbledore's army.
It's funny. That's why it's so hard for some people to kill their television or whatever. It's because it was their nanny. Like, you're asking somebody to kill their nanny.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And he says that a lot of the problem he thinks of the current insanity is because the media, the parent is dying.
Yeah.
So it's one thing for like you to have a parent that's the media, which is bad enough, but now like the DVD market, which kept up Hollywood forever, collapsed. Obviously, the streaming is nowhere near as popular as selling physical goods. It's more popular, but it's not as profitable.
Right.
Streaming is pennies on the dollar compared to selling DVDs and movie ticket sales. All right, so now the movies are gone. The movie theaters are largely gone because of the COVID. The DVDs aren't there anymore. Everyone's trying to make money with streaming. The media, the news has to compete with our social media, which they're like breaking news, something that was shown on Twitter 74 hours ago, because someone was actually there. We're going to talk about it now after everyone on the internet's already talking. Like, they don't have anything anymore, and so the media is dying, and it's in its death throes. And so people are watching sort of their parent die in this very violent means, and other people are saying, "I'll be your new parent. Look at me, I'm Stefan Molyneux. Look at my YouTube. I'm your new parent." And or whatever. And so a lot of it's just, this is why people get so like, believe the news, believe CNN, because it's like they don't know who else to trust. They've never had another. They don't know anything.
That's their mommy.
It's sad, but it's true.
Yeah.
It's like that's their mommy. And of course he touches on, then he says, popular culture has been reduced to garbage, largely because, as we've noted on the show, we're no longer a nation but an empire. Nations can go on indefinitely, but empires are born to die. And they have a tendency to falling hard. Right? And he notes that he thinks that there are two surefire ways for empires to prematurely implode. One is urbanization. The other is materialism. And, if nothing else, I think that this year has shown that the modern city is sort of a death trap for the soul. And in some cases, the body.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm not anti-city in general. I think you could make a good city.
A modern city is not all cities. It is a particular thing. Right.
Exactly. Like this giant with the concrete death slabs and all that. It's very... But, he talks about how the cities, and not just in the West, people are always like, it's just a Western problem. But, no, all over in the East, too, like in Japan and China, these urbanizations depress birth rates almost to the point of extinction. Like, you look at, like, if Japan, China, for, 30 years was like, you can only have one kid.
Yeah.
Now, again, you didn't have to. You could have more than one kid. But but you had to pay a tax on it. And stuff, and that's just like now, like the people, and people complain about that, but then you look at America is socially conditioning people to have zero.
Yeah. Well, that's the idea of the city is the IQ shredder. I forget who to credit that to. I'll try to figure it out and link it, but the smartest people get jobs in the big cities, and they go there and they don't have babies.
Correct. Yeah. So it's not just a Western problem. It's all over the world. This sort of just humanity shredding lifestyle.
Yeah.
But now he notes, that is also of this year dying, and so people don't have that parent to look to either. Because at least the city sort of acts as a parent, because it gives you if you don't work, it will provide you welfare. If you don't this, it will give you that. If you want that, it provides a lot of services, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the government, the city's also sort of your parent, but that's also dying. Like Los Angeles, New York, they are crumbling. People have fled away from them in droves.
Yep.
Much to Texas's chagrin.
And they're not moving to other big cities; they're moving to little suburbs.
Right, or in Texas' case, to Austin, so they can all do whatever Austin people do. Or to Colorado. A lot of them go to Denver.
Mm-hmm.
But so this and they don't, and people are like, well, it's gonna come back. It's gonna come back. Um, uh, all the big political machines who've grown fat and complacent, they're gonna run into the brick wall just like they did in the 60s and 70s as businesses and workers flee. But this time, they don't really have to come back because we're after bandwidth. We can work remotely now.
So let's take a little aside here.
Yeah.
About this remote work stuff, because I don't see this continuing. Okay. The power of the American dollar and economy is shrinking, as we've already covered.
Correct.
And I don't think that connectivity infrastructure across the entire country in a uniform way, I think it is going to become harder to maintain, not easier to maintain going into the future because of our decrease in economic power and our ability to just keep that hardware running.
Uh-huh.
So, what has happened to property values in the big cities during the COVID and all this crazy stuff? All that the property values have dropped, right? Mm-hmm. So my idea here, and we'll see if this actually plays out this way, is that all that property is being acquired by people that know what's going to happen over the next 10 years. Mm-hmm. Then, as the national infrastructure starts collapsing, it's going to collapse from the periphery out or in, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you want all your work from home jobs that people are buying rural property and enjoying right now, within 5 years, that's going to go away again. Like, that's not going to stick. Uh-huh. And then there's going to be, oh, wait, you're going to have to move back to the city. You're going to have to move back to the city. But now the cities have been reordered and refitted to the new globalist way of living. And so, therefore, if you want to buy property in these cities that are now going to be sort of quasi campuses of giant corporations, it's going to come with some requirements for your new life global citizen.
That's true. You may not even buy property. You'll just live in like a dorm. Yes.
Like you'll be on campus. Right.
Be on campus.
So
San Francisco will be a campus.
Yeah.
It sort of really will. I mean,
and just like a college campus, you won't have all the same rights there that you do when you were living back home with mom and dad. Right? When we were in college, you couldn't own a gun in the dorm. There was no constitutional challenge to that. Right. You didn't have unlimited free speech rights. You had to file for a permit and go to a free speech area to do your free speeching in many cases. Right. So that was the laboratory and the training ground. That's why everybody had to go to college, because you had to learn how to live this way and accept this style of life. And so now the thing is going to be, you're going to go back to college as an adult, and the college is now the city, and your degree is now your job. But it's going to be that sort of life that you've already been trained for.
I mean, it sort of already is that. Like all this, like the, what is getting promoted other than like going up through the grades? Yep. I mean, it's laid out so similarly, Mm-hmm. And some people are going to like it. Like I said, the servants of the nothing are providing a service. Like Tim Dillon was joking about this. He said, look, they're building a prison, and it's going to be a nice prison. They put a lot of thought into it. You're going to have everything you really want. Yep. He said, and you know what? I'm sort of looking forward to it. I want to get up and go to the door and go out to leave, and it's going to say, sorry, the air quality's not good today. And I'm going to say, welp, I guess back to bed for me. And I'm going to get in those sheets and just snooze soundly.
Watch Netflix all afternoon.
He's like, I don't really care if the robots won't let me out of my house. Yeah. And so a lot of people are going to feel that way. But see, like, all this sounds like nonsense because people don't believe, as Christopher points out in his book, in spirits. They don't believe in the spiritual world. Mm-hmm. And so you must relearn how to see. And he says, look, to his mind, every living thing on the planet both projects and consumes spirit energy, just as things project and consume physical energy in the form of food. Like everything eats food, and eventually when things die, they're all eaten, right? Same thing in the spirit, as do many things that are no longer technically living. He says it's hard to describe exactly, so I'll just point out that our greatest thinkers took this for granted for millennia, which is true. You read the old thinkers, and they're like, "Oh yeah, it's obvious." Okay, he says that makes sound hippie.
What exactly did they take for granted?
That existence involved an exchange of spiritual energy between beings.
Okay,
right. He says that sounds sort of hippy dippy, but if you're oblivious to the spirit world, you can't draw any power from it. Without spiritual power, there's no vitality, and without vitality, there's no passion. Without passion, there's no real art. With no real art, there can't be any real culture. Worse, less benevolent spirits, and you better believe they exist, can suck power from you. That's why the elites don't do these weird rituals for like lulz.
right.
They do it because they draw spiritual power from them. They don't go to Bohemian Grove for just like, that'd be silly. They do it because they know that this stuff works. They know they can change reality with it. And they laugh at you for thinking that that it's all ooga booga nonsense.
Yeah, and I'm persuaded that the abortion phenomenon is tied into this as well.
The abortion phenomenon is child sacrifice to Moloch. Yes. And people think like, oh, well, one, it's laid out like an Aztec temple. A lot of their buildings, they're built like in the pyramid shape. But two, I think that most of the doctors that do it, doctors, quote unquote, that do these procedures are not aware of that. But I bet if you were to dig into Planned Parenthood at some point higher up, there is some sort of shrine to Moloch there. Just as, by the way, there's a shrine to Shiva at the CERN Hyper Collider.
Yeah.
Which is weird. Shiva, the god, the Hindu god of destruction.
Mm-hmm.
There's a big why? It's like, why do you have that there?
We got to listen to the science, and by the science we mean Shiva.
And by the science we mean Shiva.
Yeah.
And the turning of the turning of the age of Aquarius.
Yeah, right.
That's what we mean by the science. This is the coming. Remember that song of the age of Aquarius?
Yeah, man. Well, that's what Jung exclaimed as Hitler was invading France. Is that it is the dawning of the age of Aquarius.
He wasn't wrong. I don't know what the age of Aquarius means, but
well, they keep saying it's going to start.
Well,
so now it was the Saturn and Jupiter conjunction is supposed to be the dawning of the age of Aquarius.
The age of Aquarius dawns when this show is number 1 on iTunes. So everyone,
I think we're going to be safe then.
Everyone go and make that happen. We got to bring about the age of Aquarius.
No, don't do it. No.
Got to do it. So, okay. And he says, look, this sounds weird, but is it really that far-fetched now for a lot of people to think that reality itself is changing? Like, because of all this, because of the spiritual power, because of the magic. Like, one of the things is that you think, and this sounds crazy, and it probably is. All right, I'm not putting a lot of stock into this, but we're just considering it.
Okay.
Okay. Does it seem like maybe the past is being changed? Like the Mandela effect, are you familiar?
Yeah, oh yeah.
The Mandela effect, if you don't know, is this idea of where people were really sure that Nelson Mandela died. And then when he died, everyone was like, wait, he's been dead like 20 years. And it was like, no. It was like, no, we all remember him dying.
Yeah.
And it was like, well, no, he just died now. And like, but what? Or the Berenstain Bears.
Berenstain Bears.
No, it was Berenstain Bears. It was always Berenstain Bears. Or one of the ones that I find really disconcerting. Let's see. In the Bible, I believe I have this right. You know the verse where it's like, "And the lion shall lay down with the lamb."
Mm-hmm.
If you look that up now, go to any Bible, look it up. It says the wolf will lay down with the lamb.
This is not.
It does. It does. It's weird. Everyone remembers it one way.
Maybe we've all just been misquoting it then.
That's very possible, right? But there's so many things of this Mandela effect. Like Ed McMahon, I will fight anyone that says he wasn't in the Publishers Clearinghouse. Remember him?
Yeah.
The Publishers Clearinghouse where he went around with the big checks?
Right.
Okay.
I love Ed McMahon. That's my whole Smokestack role is based on Ed McMahon, basically.
Yeah. Well, he never did Publishers Clearinghouse.
What?
According to the records. According to the fact that you can't find any video of it happening, but everyone and their brother remembers Ed McMahon doing it. And so he pauses this thing. He says, I know this is a bit weird, but could it be that reality has been strange and mutable all along? It's not this unchanging thing. And that we're just so hypnotized by mass media and brainwashing that we couldn't recognize it. Like, is reality fixed in stone, or does it sort of is it sort of changeable? And how much is it changeable? Like in the olden days when people they would do quote unquote miraculous things, or they would do magical things that we can't do anymore. Were they really doing it? Like, was reality opened up in that way for it to happen? Right? Like, can you change reality by these magical processes like they're doing now with all their Bohemian Grove rituals and being in the tunnels of the European train stations?
I have an update. Isaiah 11:6. The wolf shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the young goat, and the calf and the lion and the fattened calf together. So the lion and the calf, the wolf dwell with the lamb.
See, that's not how anyone remembers it being.
Right, but I think that was probably just a paraphrasing of that whole verse.
It's true. I think that's probably the most likely explanation for a lot of this stuff. Nonetheless, then you think about, but what if, like we view reality as this thing that's like a thing, and then you can observe it, and you can be objectively right or wrong.
Yeah.
But what if reality itself is like one way at some points, and then it's a different way at another point?
Yeah, and I think who's old bro with the morphogenetic fields?
Yeah. Him.
Yeah.
I would have said his name if you hadn't asked me.
Man, it escaped me also. But
him.
Related.
Yeah, but related, exactly. And so and he describes this like so people have no spiritual consciousness anymore. Mm-hmm. And so they are driven by, and that's what I was trying to get with that. I was trying to make with that earlier, the little scree at the beginning. Yeah. Was this concept of what he said, if you don't have spiritual awareness, you fall victim to the Borg song.
The Borg song.
The Borg song. It's like the bad sirens, you know?
All right. It's like, hey, it's probably a good idea for me to get a computer chip plugged into my brain.
Yeah, they're literally trying to make you bored.
In my mind.
I mean, socially, the Borg are already here. Like, it must adhere to all these social tenets of what's right, and then everyone agree, and we must all conform. This is what's right. Like, there's all conformity. The demand for conformity has never been higher. But like, Elon Musk is really going to try to put a chip in your head.
Right, and one of the prerequisites for being repulsed by that is having a connection. Your life has to be connected to the natural created order in some way that God made for you to be connected to by, the natural way of life. And if you live in an aquarium, in a laboratory as a human being, you won't have any connection to that. And therefore you won't be repulsed when somebody says, hey, I want to put a chip in your brain that'll connect you to the internet at the mind level. Right?
Right.
That's what we're seeing here. That's what's going on.
Exactly. And so then he talks some more about how we got here, but then he goes into this one little bit I said, where it's called, you may not be interested in parapolitics, but parapolitics is interested in you. Right. And just aside, is the thing going to happen where the recording runs out?
Not yet.
Okay, good. So he talks about what we were talking about earlier. The ultimate grail of the dictator is the illusion of change. The harmless, controlled opposition that will generate lots of heat but no light. The old magician's trick. Now you see it, now you don't. A deceptive diversion. Like, look over here, and then the real trick's going on over here. Right? It's why, the best way this happened, so people got mad at Wall Street and started Occupy Wall Street. Mm-hmm. And then they said, oh, well, I know you guys want justice, But what you're really looking for is not economic justice, but social justice.
Yeah.
It's the bait and switch, right? And so then they were like,
Yeah,
"Oh, right,
social
we gotta
justice.
do this." It's like, and don't worry about not having any money and not being able to start a family. Just really go out there and get mad that there aren't enough transgender Filipinos. And they're like, "Yeah." Right? So it's like all the maniacal stuff is happening in the right hand, and they're like, "Look over here at the left hand."
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's the illusion of change. Like the illusion of like no, see, now it's a black guy selling your jobs to China and cutting social programs. It's different now.
Yep.
Now it's a black guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Obama offered up a symbolic social change, right? While doing every single thing that billionaire hedge fund managers who owned his soul asked him to do.
Exactly. And how many people that otherwise wouldn't have voted for him because they thought it was going to bring, racial healing, and we can move forward together as a country, and there's going to be justice, and finally everybody can feel a part of America after the long legacy of slavery and Jim Crow, and that's going to fix it. And they voted for him when otherwise they wouldn't have, because that's the sales pitch they got. But what did we get? We got more of America run by globalist technocrat hedge fund types.
Yeah, and it's the Judas goat idea. It's like it's always the inversion. Like, we offer you this, but really it's that. We offer you X, but really it's 1 over X.
Yep.
And that's why you can't put, like, it all comes down to the morality of the people and your personal morality. That's your shield against all of it, right? And then, but if the people want to go along with the story offered to them by the nothing, then they will. And they'll get away with it. But all you have to do is be like, the way you beat it, there's no one to kill. Like, there's no one. People are like, when's the boogaloo so I can shoot, like, stuff, Like, if you do that, that's what they want you to do.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But here's the problem, like because they'll always start some war for some nonsense, but then once it starts, everyone's just shooting because they're being shot at. Right? And so that's why it's like, once the war gets going,
the people that you wanted to kill won't be on the battlefield.
Exactly.
Yeah, and they never are.
They never are. The people that really did you harm are not going to be on the battlefield. The people that are responsible for the things you're mad about are not going to be there to shoot. There's no one to shoot. There's no one to do. The way you beat it is you just say, no, thank you. I would not like to live in your artificiality. No, thank you. That's all you do.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You say, no, thank you. And then they say, but what about if you don't? Then you will have all these issues. And where will you get your Netflix? And then you say, I don't know. We'll make our own entertainment.
Yeah.
I think what we do on this show is better than most of what's offered by the popular culture, as far as entertainment goes.
Yeah, that's a low bar. I mean,
we're just
honestly.
two guys with computers.
Yeah.
You can also do that. You can make your own. We can make our own music. We can make our own everything.
This is really for my entertainment as much as it is for yours, listener.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, or another way that you do the bait and switch is you, like, Christopher talks about, he got wise to this technique talking to a British police chief. He said, why don't you bobbies carry guns? And the chief sat down. He said, see, here's the thing. The idea is to project a non-threatening image, right? Because if you project a threatening image, people will react against it.
Mm-hmm.
But our strategy was to make it look like we're losing when we're actually winning. And he said, but you think about it, he said, this seems ridiculous. But you think about it, where is the most effective police state in the Western world right now? Britain. But they don't carry guns. They don't. But see, like, because it feels like they're like, well, this is it. Everything feels like a suggestion, right? Because he's not there with a gun and be like, hey, but he doesn't dress like a cowboy with a star like some cops in America do. He doesn't, he doesn't wear aviators, and look like, you got. So it feels, he's like, hey, sir, you might want to move off the street here because you don't, ba-da-ba-da. And people are like, okay. And so everything feels like a suggestion, and it feels like you go along with it. And so that's how you enslave the populace. Because if people were like, get on the ground, then people don't respond well to that, and they start fighting back. Right? And so this is why the passive aggressiveness of the social justice thing can be so effective for people, because it's again selling you a story that like, oh, nothing really bad is happening.
It's funny. I wonder how successful the banking industry would be if bankers took your deposits at gunpoint.
Exactly. Same thing.
At the same time, if you don't use their services, life will be very difficult for you in America by design.
Yeah. Like people think like it's the same thing with taxes. People are like, well, we pay our taxes so that something such and such happens. Now, again, that's not true. They can just print the money for whatever they want. But two, it's like they make it seem like that. But if you really don't for long enough, the gun will come out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? If you don't pay your taxes for long enough, the gun will appear.
That's the greatest injustice, or one of the greatest injustices of America that nobody talks about, is that a man can't leave a family, homeland, property, estate to his children. And usually what happens is, to pay the taxes on the inheritance, the farm has to be sold and broken off, and the children cannot continue the economic heritage of their parents.
Yeah.
Which is what has happened to the American family farm. And that's how, the giant ag corporations end up owning all the farms and all the farming, because the kids of the farmer can't pay the tax. They can't pay the tax on the property when they inherit it.
Right. And there, of course, like, there's always ways around it, guys. You can always feel like you're just like, well, I'm going to sell it to you while I'm still alive for a very cheap price.
Yeah. But you gotta be smart about it. You
gotta be smart. You can't depend on them to do anything for you, right?
Because there's it's a bunch of traps laid out to strip your family of what belongs to your family.
Right.
And give it to bankers and mega corporations.
Right. So let's look at some concrete examples of parapolitics he starts out with his book before we finish up. And this ties into sympathy for the devil again, because, one of the people that I think a lot of us are not, I think a lot of people on left and right are not very fond of, is a little lady called Hillary Clinton. But let's look at her. Let me just offer you a different possible view on her for a second.
Okay.
Okay, so, why did Hillary's emails come out? You ever think about that? Who did that?
Good question.
Who had access to all of her emails to release? And then you start thinking about that and you say, oh, the most likely culprit was the deep state. The CIA. Who else would have the access to all this stuff?
Right.
Just like who would have all the access to all the Biden stuff, the Hunter Biden tapes.
Right.
And you say, well, why? But I thought they were working for the deep state. And you say, yes. But how do you make sure that your worker bees in the politics are loyal to you? You show them how easily they can destroy you. You say, look, hey, Biden, we just put all this stuff out. Do you really want to go against us? We could really make this an issue. We could make the media run with this. We could turn the mob on you. Yeah. You really want to go against it? Or in Hillary's case, look, you've got a lot of skeletons. We can look past them, but we can also not. We can also not look past them. What are you going to do? Now, then you say, now why? So is there a reason maybe that Hillary... So in some ways I'm saying like Hillary herself is a victim here of the deep state. And she is. And because, sympathy for the devil, sympathy for those you don't like. Like, she was married to a psychopath who got her involved in some terrible things. And she got very afraid, and she wanted a piece of that pie too, so she could have some power and not feel so powerless. Right? That's why she sought out all these positions and stuff. So, just you got to see where people are coming from. But another thing that maybe her emails released, is it because Hillary was one of the biggest proponents of releasing all the UFO stuff that's ever been in politics. Are you aware of this?
No.
Hillary talked about UFOs more than anybody. She would talk about it on late night shows. She would issue things. She was like, look, when I get in I'm going to release all the information about Area 51. She was like, she's a UFO lady. She's into UFOs. I mean, I guarantee you she knows all about Betty and Barney Hill. She knows about Rendlesham. She's all about it. Okay, so then you say, come on. You're saying they released her emails because she was gonna, if she got in to be the president, that she would talk about UFOs? Well, JFK did die less than 2 weeks after putting out a memo of an executive order that he wanted all the secret files on UFO technology to be released to the public. And that's a bit of a weird timing, isn't it? And then it never happened because, right. Gerald Ford made a lot of noise about UFOs when he was Speaker of the House. He instigated actions that led to the formation of the Condon Committee, which turned out to say, UFOs are all nonsense, which no one believed. Ford tried to remain active on the issue when he was the president, but when he became president, he fell silent about it for some threats, because wouldn't you know that when he got in, he was the victim of not one but 2 assassination attempts.
Really?
Yeah, no one ever talks about that. They tried to kill him twice. They missed. But so he sort of went quiet on the UFO thing. Now, even so, he did declassify a few things, like MK Ultra program.
Right.
So maybe some of these people that appear bad are trying their best, and so maybe they're doing something. Maybe. I'm not saying you should like Hillary. I'm just saying maybe you don't know the full story.
Okay.
Maybe you don't. Maybe we don't. All right.
Well, that's the thing. Bad guys can be taken captive and enslaved also.
Right. Now, do you know who the 2 people were that tried to kill Jerry Ford?
No.
One of them was Lynette Squeaky Frome.
I remember that name. But what's the story?
Well, she was of the Manson family.
Right.
The Jolly West Process Church Axis.
Yeah, which was a CIA op, obviously.
And she was also an MK Often graduate. There's MK Ultra, but no one talks about MK Often, which was I've never heard of program. That. I know MK Often. So it was MK Ultra and MK Often, and MK Ultra was about mind control, and and then they shut down MK Ultra, and were like, yeah, we're not doing that anymore, and then they started MK Often, which is almost the same, but also with occult magic.
Ooh.
So they would, and I'm not making this up. The CIA had a program called MK Often after MK Ultra, which was LSD-based mind control. They started a program MK Often. They said, well, that worked pretty good, actually. We told the public it didn't, but that was actually really useful, MK Ultra. Let's do it again, and this time let's try to do magic spells. Let's see if we can stare at goats and kill them with our minds.
Is that where the goat thing came from? Was MK Ultra?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And they had Project Stargate, which was related, which was where they had remote viewers try to view things on other planets and get in contact with aliens, aka spirits from the heavens. And I'm not making any of this up. It's crazy. Ingo Swann was part of this, and he viewed naked bodybuilding men on the backside of the moon, building a base. And all of his all of the work that came out of it both was revealing in what the government was doing, but also what really might be reality and about aliens and stuff. And it was also at the same time all homoerotic. Like the guys they did it, there was all this tension of like Ingo Swann, who was one of the greatest. He was one of the greatest Stargate program people for the government. Also, for some reason, all of his aliens were very muscular, blue-skinned men that never wore clothes.
Well, there's a lot of homosexuality in occultism. I mean,
yeah, and his book was called which he wrote about his remote viewing. And the thing about it is, a lot of his remote viewing turned out to be correct. Like he viewed the rings around Jupiter, remote viewing, before they were ever seen. He said there's faint rings around Jupiter. And all this weird stuff, and he would like do things with the cult. It was weird, but his book that he wrote about in his memoirs was called Penetration, and ostensibly it was like penetrating the veil of mystery or some nonsense. But it's like, yeah, okay. And then you're like 10 pages in, and then he was like, and the oiled men were on the backside of the moon. They had blue skin, and they were doing some sort of mining operation.
On the backside, you say?
Yeah, on the dark side. Yeah. So, more of that. So, the other one that tried to kill him was Sarah Jane Moore, another MK Austin graduate. Isn't that a bit weird?
2 of them.
Yeah. So, maybe that was them like being like, hey, shut up about the UFOs. Jimmy Carter, who came after Ford, was even more of an activist on the UFO issue, saying, if I ever become president, if I ever become president, I'll make every piece of information this country has about UFO sightings available to the public and scientists. Okay? Did that happen? No. And when he got into office, he expanded the powers of the Freedom of Information Act program, and then in Iran, the U.S. embassy was seized. Its occupant held hostage for months. Carter ordered a rescue mission that ended in a disaster. Everything collapsed. The siege of the embassy, and it crippled Carter's presidency, and they got him out. The Iran so every time anyone has tried to do anything in the U.S., that's three presidents, and one presidential candidate that were like, hey, that showed public interest about opening the UFO files, face significant unfortunate outcomes.
Interesting.
Isn't that a bit weird? Now, you don't have to believe in, UFOs and as being aliens for that to work. You can just say the deep state doesn't want you poking in their secret black budget program.
Yeah.
They don't want you to open that drawer and see that there's no money there or whatever. Right? But yeah, you can go through and he goes and Knowles, Christopher, in his book, lays out a bunch of these other cases, and then he sums it up and says, strange as it sounds, if you're a politician messing around with UFOs, it has a startlingly high mortality rate. Right? Like, don't poke your head in the black budget program. Don't do it. JFK. Right, so the elected officials are not the real government. They are. There's the deep state, and then there's more examples of parapolitics. The spirit cooking we saw, where they did a bunch of like ritualistic cannibalism. The MK Often, the MK Ultra. MK Ultra had connections with the Satanic Temple. Then there was Reagan had an astrologer. He had a court astrologer.
Really?
Joan Quigley.
Oh no, yeah.
Joan Quigley. Every single because his wife was so into astrology. But he said, look, someone in his cabinet said, listen, that after he was out, they said, how much was she involved? And the guy goes, look, Joan Quigley, Reagan's astrologer, was involved in every single decision Reagan made. He said whenever he would think about signing a bill or doing a thing or doing anything, he would have her in there to read the star charts.
Yep.
And whether or not it was good for him to move forward or not. It was just all based on woo-woo. And you think about how much of this parapolitics is like there's the Skull and Bone Society, which Bush is 100% in and 100% exists. Right? There's Bohemian Grove. Bill and Hillary do voodoo. Like Bill was on thing, and he goes, Hillary communes with Eleanor Roosevelt, and he made this weird motion with his hands, and then you realize that he means that she does seances and talks with the spirit of Eleanor Roosevelt.
It makes sense. Why the Clintons are so into Haiti.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So look, like my grandma always used to say, you may not be interested in parapolitics, but parapolitics is interested in you.
Mm.
So, and this is a great book. Endless American Midnight lays out so many things. Christopher's a very smart man. I recommend you all give him a small donation of whatever you feel is appropriate and get his book. It's good. And so don't serve the servants of the nothing.
Don't do it.
That's the main thrust of this. Don't do that. Don't do that because sometimes I don't know. You may end up meat may fall on your head if you live in Kentucky or whatever.
Don't eat the meat.
Yeah. If meat falls out of the sky, just leave it alone.
Don't touch it.
It's like one of our PSAs, when we were kids and they were all like, here's what you do if you're ever in quicksand. And it's like, wow,
You gotta lay some sticks down across the top of the quicksand.
I really grew up thinking quicksand was going to be way more of a problem than it turned out to be.
So did I. And I've yet to encounter it.
Also being set on fire. Stop, drop, and roll.
Yeah, I set myself on fire on purpose one time, but it didn't happen. It was a controlled environment.
Yeah. How many kids in the 90s were being lit on fire that was a PSA that needed to go out?
I don't know, man. 90s were a weird time. Well, the Clintons doing voodoo could have been resulting in spontaneous combustions.
We should do a show on that. Spontaneous combustion is fascinating.
Sounds great.